Hello everyone, this is Alpha Kake here. I'm in this class, LEH355, so this is my presentation. I basically will be arguing for the no answer to this question. Should new drugs be given to patients outside of clinical trials? Basically, I was assigned to defend the no position. So that's what I'm going to do. So, but before we get there, I just wanted to take us to how do drugs get developed, basically prescription drugs. So when a prescription drug is being developed, it has to go through three stages, and these stages are called phases. Okay, phases. So here is phase one. The phase one study of any drug development mainly focuses on the safety of the drug. Basically, at phase one, what's most important for the Food and Drug Administration is to make sure that the drug is safe, is not going to be killing people. So people that are enrolled in this clinical trial, as Rachel pointed out in her book, Taking Sides, the people have to be in the clinical setting and monitored by the company. And at this phase, there are endpoints, meaning there are goals, and those endpoints have to be met before the drug can be moved, before the drug can move from phase one to phase two, and also from phase two to phase three. So as one can see, there are a lot of phases that are involved before a drug can be approved. But going back to our main topic, the question is now, should people who are not enrolled in a clinical trial have access to drugs that have passed phase one trial? That's the $1 million question that I'll be arguing the no answer for. So, as previously explained, there are two groups when a drug is being developed. Mainly, there's only one group, the ones who are in the clinical trial, and then the ones who are outside of the clinical trials. So the question here, should the people outside the clinical trials have access to drugs that have passed phase one? My answer is no. But before we even answer that question, how did this whole thing, this whole advocacy of people to have access to drugs that have not passed even the phase three trial, that are not even approved by the FDA? So this whole thing started in the height of the AIDS epidemic in the 1980s, where people really wanted to have access to drugs that are promising, but they have not been yet approved by the FDA. So as AIDS was really ravaging around the world, people started advocating for the government to allow this drug to be used by the general population. That's basically how the whole thing started. But now it has moved to other drugs in the other areas of the medicine for different diseases also. So that's how it started. So my new position, I say no, people shouldn't have access to drugs that have not passed the FDA approval, that have just passed phase one, for the following reasons. Basically, these drugs only gives false hopes, and it's also bad for science. It's also bad for the economics of it. The companies that are developing these drugs, if you make them to have these drugs available to the general population, it will cost them more and more money, which might even put some of them in financial jeopardy. So, and lastly, but not least, according to the philosophical theories we've been studying this semester, this kind of thing shouldn't happen. And I will argue for the no answer of that. So, how does it give you false hope? My first point. It gives a false hope in the sense that the drugs that are at phase one are not tested for their efficacy. They are tested only for their safety. Let's remember that. At this stage, the drugs are made to make sure it will not kill people. Efficacy is tested in phase two and phase three trials. So how this is bad for the drug science itself? We say that it's bad because um, it's bad for science because as a basically one of the websites that I use to do this research is called The Conversation. In one of the articles, they say that giving the patient the right to try experimental drugs is basically a political maneuver, not a lifesaver. And we know when we say people have to have access to these drugs, we really want to save their lives because mostly they are the end of life. They are terminally ill people that we really want to help. And this website also in their article continues on saying that a growing number of evidence from policy analysts argues that the legislation that allow this will unfortunately accomplish very little change for people, for most patients. Okay, and it might even make it harder for the new drug to be approved in the future. Uh, the most important thing in this slide here is because it makes it harder for the drug to be approved in the future. Um, that point that it makes it harder is very very bad, because as we see, when the drugs is being developed, the FDA only approves drugs based on data that has been collected on people that are enrolled in the clinical trials. Now, the people that are enrolled outside the clinical trials, the data that's collected from these people cannot be used by the FDA, but they should know about it. So imagine if the people that are enrolled in a clinical trial all have a good response to this drug. They have responded very well to the treatment, but the people outside the clinical trial somehow do not have as good of a response. Even though the FDA by legislation cannot use their data, but they may have that in the back of their minds, and that might give them a pause into approving this drug. So for the science of it, I don't think the people that are outside the clinical trials should have really access to these drugs. So it might even lead the FDA to rejecting a drug that should have been available to the general population. So when it comes to the cost of it, it's very bad for the economics of the drug development also. Basically, who will cover the cost of the drugs? The government, the individual patient. One thing is obvious, it will not be covered by the health insurance companies, knowing that the drug is not even approved by the FDA. And another point to add is that maybe only the wealthy will be able to afford such drugs, because these are very, very expensive drugs, as one can know. To want to ask the pharmaceutical companies to make available to whoever might need it is really to put an additional financial burden on them at this stage of the development. These drugs are very expensive, as we said earlier, and are only also in limited quantity. As you can see, the following slide we're going to see can tell you some drugs that are expensive once they get approved, what it takes to have the drug in just 1 month of treatment. So the following slide will tell us some of these drugs. Basically, if one had to have them in 1 month of treatment, the person will have to pay this amount. So the Myalepт, it costs me $71,000. Really, I don't know exactly what that drug treats, but as you can see, the Daraprim at the bottom costs $45,000. The most expensive is $71,000. So these drugs, even in their early stages when they're being developed, they're still very expensive. This year in the list, they have been approved, but this is what it will take for someone to get treated with this type of drug. They're really OMG, as I said in the title of the slide. They're very expensive. So to make this type of drug, even in the phase 1 trial, available to the general population, it's really a financial burden that pharmaceutical companies cannot bear. Now, in the light of the philosophical theories we have studied this semester, let's look also how we will discuss it with the philosophical theories. I will start with the social contract of Rousseau. When Rousseau states in the social contract that each person gives himself whole and entire. The condition is same for everyone. No one has an interest in making it burdensome for others. And he says, so for the social contract point of view of Rousseau, if somehow we as a society, we happen to put burden on the pharmaceutical companies that those they are now willing to accept, we are breaking the social contract, because we are making it burdensome for them. And for the utilitarians, Bentham and Mills, the principle of the greatest happiness for the greatest number, we are also breaking it, because we are focusing too much on the small number of people that might benefit from the drug right now, but we're not seeing the future, the thousands or maybe the millions of people that may benefit from this drug once it follows due course and gets approved by the FDA. So for the Kantian view, my focus is on both the imperative, the categorical, and the practical. But I'm saying I'm more focusing on Kant's practical imperative, which says that we always have to use people as an end in themselves, not as a mean to an end. So if we pressure the pharmaceutical companies to make these drugs available, we're really not using them as an end in themselves. So as you can see, because of the issues we raised, because of the philosophical theories we studied this semester. I think that many things that go against making these drugs available. I don't think I was done really. I think the only thing that was left was my works cited. So that was the last page that I missed out. So, but that would be it. The works cited that I added. So, see everyone this week on the discussion. So.